meeting to order. And before we go into closed session, I'm going to ask for any public comment. Sorry I didn't have my mic on. I think everyone heard me, I hope. Yeah.
Something about public comment, I think. Good morning. Tom Bunn, attorneys for Searles Valley Minerals. I'm here to talk about the draft safe yield allocation chart that was given to the PAC before the last meeting, and specifically about the treatment of Searles on that chart. And to be clear, I'm talking about the water that Searles uses directly and not the water allocated to the community of Trona. The introduction that's attached to that chart says, the attached chart does not reflect a legal determination of anyone's water rights. This chart merely reflects an analysis of California water law to determine the use priorities of the basin's sustainable yield, which is then used to determine how much, if any, augmentation supply is needed to sustain someone's pumping. I believe that's the correct approach under SGMA. The introduction then goes on to say, Council for the Groundwater Authority have determined that existing water rights law provides the Navy with a Federal Reserve water right that is superior to all other water rights in the basin, with the exception of those rights that were in existence at the time the base was founded. As you know, Searles claims such a pre-existing right, which as far as I know is undisputed. So you'd expect to see on the chart an allocation to Searles at the top, followed by the Navy reserved right. But you don't. Instead, you see the Navy at the top with a zero allocation for Searles. The reason for this is said to be the Navy's sovereign immunity. But sovereign immunity just means that the Navy cannot be sued except in certain circumstances. It doesn't prevent you from allocating water in authority with your analysis of water rights law, just as the document says you're doing and just as it's your legal duty to do. The amount of Searles' pre-Navy water right is about half of its current water use. So even with an allocation in that amount, Searles will have to make up the difference. And that won't be easy. But I need to be clear to you all here. Searles cannot survive with a zero allocation. It will shut down. The good news is that the problem is easy to fix. Just give Searles an allocation for his pre-Navy production right. If you change nothing else on that chart, it would mean that the water district would require a somewhat larger amount of the so-called augmentation supply, and Searles would require somewhat less. But it would allow Searles to survive, and it would be consistent with your duty to allocate water in accordance with water rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other public comment before we recess into closed session? All right, hearing none, we'll move into closed session. I'm going to go ahead and get ready to open the open session. So if you have, please seated. And first thing, Jim, do you have a report on the closed session?
Yes, the board met with staff and legal counsel on the items under a closed session, and no action was taken. That requires disclosure under the Brown Act.
Thank you. And can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Mallory, could you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Director Heyman.
Present.
Chairman Kaczynski.
Present.
Director Page.
Present.
Vice Chair Gleason.
Present.
Thank you. So we're ready for public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items. Unless authorized by law, comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. When you step to the podium, please give us your name.
You are asking for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, sometimes I lose track. The agenda is too long. Okay, I'm Lori Wagner in your current area, returning for 3 minutes, part 4. I repeat the words of my August 15 address, which due to out-of-order business was never heard by those attending at the audience level and only distributed to the GA members in writing. I reiterate that this valley's private property well owners have tried several times to communicate with you the fact that you are not addressing the actual cause of any aquifer shortage of water here in IWV. Thus, the following input is going to be straight to the point. California government at any level has no authority to go over the top of existing water rights laws, period. The government works for the people, not the government rules the people. We stand by that fact. Also, neither SGMA nor California government can legally pass any requirements that are basically blackmail and go above the propositions or laws passed by the California voting citizens who are above politicians in the chart of who is in charge. We the people are on top and will take and do have final authority. We will exercise that authority. I'm sure you're all familiar with term class action lawsuits. The fees, regulations, etc., that politicians via SGMA in Sacramento seem to think they do have the authority to just impose on any American citizen are not only blackmail but are also illegal. Remember, laws passed by the voting citizens cannot be overridden or changed by politicians. Again, the term class action lawsuits apply. This statement is not blackmail, it is fact. The IWV GA has spent millions of dollars in the pursuit of trying to resolve the water issues here in the valley, have not ever paid any attention to the real cause of any water issues, and expect us, the private property well owners, to pay the bills you have created. No. We have had no ability to approve or disapprove any expenditures that you have made, and we have no obligation to pay the bills for anything for which we disapprove. This whole SGMA and creation of the GA should never have happened. The IWV water issues are totally different compared to other areas of California, which areas are also different from each other. There is no one cause fits all. Attached is these people have an attachment. Attached is a picture of Owens Lake, an aerial photograph, plus 4 more pictures, plus background information of Owens Lake before LA started diverting our water. Now do you understand what has happened to our IWV aquifer water? We remain open to discussion at any time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good morning. My name is Shirley Kirkpatrick, and I want to continue on this newsletter regarding U.S. Supreme Court rules in favor of property owners. A sharply divided U.S. Supreme Court ruled the Friday of this newsletter, that property owners can go directly to federal court with claims that state and local regulations effectively deprive landowners of their use of their property. The 5-4 decision overturned decades of precedent that barred property owners from going to federal court until their claims had been denied in state court. Federal courts are often viewed as friendlier than state courts for such property claims. The decision, with all 5 of the court's conservatives in the majority, may have particular effects in cities and coastal areas that have strict regulations for development. Property owners and developers often have complained that zoning rules and other state and local regulations effectively take their property for public benefit, and that the Constitution requires that they be paid just compensation. The court's decision came in the case of Rosemary Nick, who owns 90 acres of land in Scott Township, Pennsylvania. Nick's home and a grazing area for her horses are on the land, as well as a small cemetery where her neighbors' ancestors are allegedly buried. When the town enacted a rule requiring all cemeteries to be open to the public during daytime hours, Nick went to state court seeking a judgment that the state had in effect taken her property. When the town withdrew its notice that she was violating local cemetery law, the state court said Nick could not prove that she was being harmed. When the town enacted a rule requiring all cemeteries to be open to the public during daytime hours, Nick went to state court seeking a judgment that state in effect had taken her property. When the town withdrew its notice that she was violating the local cemetery law, the state court said Nick could not prove that she was being harmed. So she went to the federal courts, which threw out her case based on decades-old Supreme Court decisions that have consistently required property owners to go to the state courts before appealing to the federal courts. On Friday, however, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the first of those decisions, a 1985 ruling that required property owners to take their complaints to the state courts first. Instead, the court majority said Nick and other property owners seeking compensation for limits on their property rights may go directly to federal court. We now conclude that the state litigation requirements imposes an unjustifiable burden on a property owner's claim that his or her land has been effectively taken for public benefit without the government paying just compensation, wrote Chief Justice John Roberts. In essence, Roberts said property owners are entitled to have the same rights in federal court that other citizens have if they can prove that their constitutional rights have been violated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for the public? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public comment section and move on to the consent agenda. We're looking for approval of the minutes of the board meeting September 19th, 2019, and approve the expenditures as listed. Don, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I'll go into more detail during the financial report, but I just want to make you aware that we do have sufficient funds to pay all the invoices that are that are currently listed. I would say that number 3, the Stetson invoice, we have some deferred invoices from Stetson, so I'd prefer to pay the earliest one first and defer this one. But I'll go into more detail, but we do have that. Also, I'd like to request that we move agenda item 10 after agenda item 7. Seems to make more sense to have the financial discussion before we go into the budget.
Does the board agree with that? Just move the financial discussion before a budget approval. It's up to you. I have no problem with it.
Okay.
All right, that's it. So I'll be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have a second. All right. Any public comment before we move on to vote? All right. Let's call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. So now we'll move on to item 7, Proposition 68, description, presentation of Proposition 68 funding opportunities, titled Planning Grants Proposal Solicitation Package Round 3. And board to consider approval of Resolution 7-19, authorizing Stetson Engineering to prepare the Proposition 68 grant. Did I see some slides or something on that, Steve, that you have prepared? Or yeah. Okay. All right. He's looking for a clicker.
Oh, I don't
there we
have
go.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see everybody. We're back up. Another meeting. God, these months go by fast. I don't know for you guys, but they go by fast. And going by faster. It's good to be back up here. Beautiful day, beautiful drive up. I've got Jeff Helsley with me today. This item, Prop 68 funding, is an extension of the Prop 1 type funding. It's for both planning and implementation, so there is some implementation money for the GSP. And there's kind of at least there was a deadline. Jeff, I did hear earlier today that there might be an extension. I think Eddie mentioned there might be an extension on the delivery date for the application, which we'll certainly follow up on. But it's brought to the board today because in order to get the application in according to the current deadline, a board resolution needs to be adopted. So Jeff's going to walk through, I think, if you're going to get the PowerPoint
No,
up.
he doesn't have them. I'm not sure why. We'll have to check into that. But I'll give you an overview. There's a Prop 68 Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant opportunity that's open now The solicitation package was released on September 9th. The applications are due November 1st, as Steve said. They anticipate awarding the funds in March of 2020.
Jeff just told us that. Just so everybody knows, there are handouts out front on what was going to be the PowerPoint that he's walking through. So if you don't have one, there should be one out front.
There's approximately $47 million available through this grant opportunity for the whole state for those that qualify, which are groundwater sustainability agencies, and it is a competitive grant process. If you're selected for a grant, there's a minimum award of $200,000 that you can get, and then they have a maximum amount of up to $2 million you can get. However, they subtract out the amount of the Prop 1 grants that were given out to help prepare the GSPs. And it's not straight subtraction, because there's certain categories from our Prop 1 grant that count against this new grant opportunity, and certain things that are not counted against it. But basically, we've been working with DWR staff, and this is what's not in your board package, because we just got this in the last couple of days. They're estimating that this groundwater authority could receive up to $300,000 in grant money. There generally is a minimum local share required of 25%. There are provisions, depending on the status of disadvantaged communities that are benefited by this, for that match to be reduced. Based on the work that we did documenting disadvantaged communities for this basin for the Prop 1 grant, it looks to us like the minimum match that would be required would be 15%. When I originally saw the grant, I was thinking we would apply for the activities that we need to start next year to implement the GSP next year and the year after. But in reading the grant further, you can go back to the middle of last year for reimbursement on grant money, and even farther for your available match. So we've turned around and tried to focus on what past costs could we put into this grant to help you recover some of the things that weren't covered in Prop 1. And the things we've identified and proposed to put into the grant are reimbursement for some of the imported water supply procurement costs, the Capital Corps work, and some of the work we did in supporting Capital Corps that was not funded by the Prop 1 grant, and we believe is eligible for reimbursement under this grant. And that's, again, work they have already done or will complete here shortly, not what might be anticipated in the future. There's some money from the allocation process, that is the meeting among the attorneys of the major stakeholders and the board's attorneys. This would be mostly Mr. Markman's fees, past fees, that could be applied for this. And we, again, gave technical support to some of those meetings and to the attorneys to try and evaluate some of the things that were discussed there. We proposed to put those past costs in. We are looking into whether the support work that was been done by us for the pumping fee is eligible or not. Certainly the staff of the member agencies did most of the work in putting that together, but we gave some support work to that wasn't covered by Prop 1. It doesn't look like it's precluded, but it's from what we've seen, but it's not absolutely clear it would be counted. We're going to try and get clarification from DWR on that. And then, and after that, it was hard to find sort of major items of past work that weren't covered by the Prop 1 application. There were very small amounts that, frankly, in the time we have left to put the application together, would be pretty burdensome to describe and give budgets and schedules on. So we are looking at one project going forward for potentially asking for funding, and that's the shallow well mitigation plan. The draft GSP, when it's released, will propose that there be a shallow well mitigation plan developed and implemented And what we propose to do is the actual work to be done next year, to develop draft proposal on that and work through developing what the mitigation plan would look like, what the criteria would be, how we'd administer that, and also put in request for some grant funds to actually mitigate some of that, re-drill some wells if needed. And in the next year or two, we're anticipating putting that in there. I mentioned the limit that DWR has indicated we'd be eligible for is $330,000. The work I just described will be quite a bit above that, but we just want to, we don't have an absolute guarantee that that's the number. We want to make sure we've got plenty in there in case they decide, oh, you can get some more. We want to have the request in. So that's what we would propose to put into the grant. And it should be easy to show a local match because the GA's attorneys participated, in-kind services and the meetings and the allocation. The staff worked on the pumping fees. We don't see that there would need to be any additional funds put up or new expenditures to show a local match. We'd be able to show in-kind services that have already been provided. I had a slide that showed all the things that have to go into a Prop 68 grant application, but I won't go over that. There is a resolution in the board package. The grant requires that the Groundwater Authority board approve a resolution authorizing submittal of the grant and authorizing someone to sign it if it is awarded. That's part of what needs to go into the package, so that's in your package for the board to consider today.
What's the timing? We have to have everything in by November?
November 1st.
November 1st. Did I hear that there might be some extension that we don't?
I don't think it's official, but I think
it's worth looking at. Okay.
Okay. We had not, DWR hadn't mentioned that to us. So it might be an extension? Okay.
Could be. Okay. And, of course, the million-dollar question, cost. We have an estimated cost of what it's going to take to put this together.
Cost to prepare it. We had estimated $27,000 when we originally looked at this. Since we are, and then again, I was thinking we were going to submit for funding for programs going forward. Now that we're doing some of the projects that work that we've already done, things like Capital Corps already has a scope of work. There already is a schedule. We can use some of that. I haven't been able to go back and revisit the budget, but I think we can do it for less than that. And the other thing is we don't have enough time now to.
And the other thing is we did have a coordination with Don with the Water District to look for help, staff help.
Right.
And Don has offered up staff, and so we are going to use Water District staff, not you, Lauren. That's how your eyes get big.
So she's the official timekeeper.
Sorry.
And,
we're going to try to use staff to help us. Tim, I think, has offered up, and Tim's offered to participate too. So where we can, we're going to try and offload some of that so that it's like in-kind cost, not just us.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I forgot to mention that Tim's actually already given us some feedback on a few of the requirements of the GSP that we asked him to look into.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeff and the board? Any comments?
Steve, can you describe the staff work from your team that would be going into this to lead up to, if you had no help, the cost that you expect it to be? How many staff folks? What are we looking at in terms of how much time they're going to be spending between now and the grant writing proposal?
Probably, honestly, John, Jeff will probably answer it because he's got the guys working on it right now. We actually, in discussions with the Water District, we kind of started on stuff already, so we've already got some staff assigned to it. I'm not sure, is Joseph working on it? I think Heather is helping.
To develop the numbers I gave you and figure out what we might put into this, we have already had some people working on this. I've got 2 engineers that are working on it pretty much full time, and that would continue through the next 2 weeks. They're getting support from Heather because they have not specifically been working on the details of our GSP, the 2 engineers that are putting the grant together, but they prepared grants before. They helped put together the Prop 1 grant here, and they put together other state grants. So Heather will be putting some time in on it. And then Joseph Montoya, who's worked on the imported water issues, will be giving them support, and then my time.
And your best estimate for what it would likely cost in terms of a range, assuming the in-kind services from member staff?
I had originally estimated 27,000. I
Understood.
mean, I would think, now, as I say, we're doing past work that has information available. We don't have to develop it. Probably be closer to 20,000.
And I know you can't give a guarantee. You've already said that, and I don't expect you to. How confident are you that we will be awarded a grant at the end of the day?
I really don't know how many people will. I mean, I think we've got clear projects. The state has prioritized critically overdrafted basins. It seems, these all seem to fit. I think it'll be a very good application. It is competitive, and I just don't know, what other people are going to put in and how the state's exactly going to look at that.
John, we've kind of heard two sides of it. One of them is it's going to be very competitive because there's a lot of folks like us who are in the GSP stage that are looking for money to do things now. So it's very competitive. There's not that much money out there. So one side is very competitive. The flip side is, as Jeff mentioned, we are critically overdrafted basins, so we're kind of high on the list. Our last application was approved, so we know we're on their list. And there's been a lot happening up here with the earthquakes and other things. There's a lot of attention to this area. So I think we feel pretty confident that we should be able to get this, or we wouldn't be recommending it. But as you mentioned before, it's also going to be a very competitive. Will we get the full amount? I don't know, but hopefully we'll get it.
And I think the board probably understands I'm asking for obvious reasons, given our big picture financial questions. And I'm inclined to go for this funding since, the upside's probably a lot bigger than the downside in terms of a $20,000 cost. But it obviously is something that we need to start considering item by item with regard to our spending. So,
Unfortunately, it takes money to get money, so anytime you repair these things, but I think we're in as Jeff would say, a fairly good shape because we have a lot of things that have been done that can be fit into this as projects we've already started, completed, or worked on. And I think that helps out a lot. So I'm sort of inclined myself to move ahead with it. Anything else from the board? If I move to public? All right, I'll go ahead and unless anybody's got anything. Hang on, do you have anything, Jim?
You're really looking for about a two-part motion here. The first part would be to authorize Stetson to prepare and submit the application on behalf of the Groundwater Authority for the Prop 68 grant solicitation. And the second part is to adopt Resolution 719, which also authorizes the general manager to execute an agreement with the state of California, which is a requirement. So by doing that, we would comply with everything.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any other comments? I would like to open it to the public before we take a vote. No, I didn't.
While they're coming up, my staff did want me to point out that there'll be another implementation grant funding opportunity from DWR in mid to late 2021.
So there's more possibly coming. All right.
I just have a question regarding the budget. Where is this going to fit in? Because you just have all these budget things later on in the meeting. So how are we going to get the 20,000 fit in? Do you have any idea?
We're going to be having a discussion on the finances and the budget as soon as we get through this.
You think you'll be able to find the money somewhere in there, in the discussion?
I think we need to find it.
Okay. All right. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no more comment from the public, I'll go ahead and bring back to the board for one last thing. If nothing, we'll go ahead and Jim, we already have a motion in a second, so.
It's a roll call vote because there's a resolution involved.
That's what I thought. Roll call vote, please.
Director Vallejo?
aye.
Director Hayman?
Aye.
Chairman Kaczynski?
Aye.
Director Page?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gleason?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we had a request that we go ahead and move item 10, update on IWV GA finances. So we're going to be discussing the finances as we speak. So Don, please proceed.
Well, first of all, earlier this month, we did do a sweep into the county account for the GA of $100,124.79. So as you can see on the report that's in the packet, there is a balance of $160,000 and $849. Let me start over again. $160,849. So the invoices that you see and that you just approved in the consent agenda, replacing the number 3, the Stetson invoice, with the earlier one that we deferred prior. If we pay all those, that will leave a balance of $9,207.69 in the account. As I've been reporting for the last couple of months, we are awaiting still the reimbursement from the second invoice submittal for the Prop 1 grant. I did send an email a week ago Monday to DWR, again inquiring could they give us some idea when to expect that. The response I got was that the check was cut on that day, a week ago Monday, and that to expect it in within 10 business days. So should be here. The check's in the mail, is what I want to say. That check is in the amount of $352,055.21. So that will allow us to pay 3 of the previously deferred Stetson invoices, amounting to $286,244.34, which will leave us a balance from that reimbursement as well as the balance that's in the account with a total of $75,018.56. And we will just have the one Stetson invoice for $102,000 that's on this current consent agenda still outstanding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm looking for comments from the board, please.
Yeah, I had a clarification. The list of unpaid invoices includes 2 from Richards, Watsons, and Gershon, which neither of those amounts match the amount that was mentioned on the agenda under expenditures. The expenditures indicate $9,620. The finance report has 913 invoice in the amount of, sorry, my eyes aren't very good, but it's like $8,200 almost.
Pretty small.
And then another 10/8/19 invoice for just under $5,800. So I'm wondering what the discrepancy is.
Well, the numbers I used for the total, the $151,641, were those taken from the financial package. I'm not sure why on the consent agenda.
So on consent, should we have approved payment of both of these invoices as mentioned in the finance report as opposed to that dollar amount, which I think matches what was on the agenda last month?
As I said, the total, the $151,641.31 includes everything up to that you see on the finance report, including the first Stetson invoice dated 5/23/19. So it would include those 2.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you saying is that the dollar amounts on the finance report are correct. So does that mean, Council, Jim, that we need to revise our approval of the expenditure for Richards, Watson, Gershon on the consent calendar?
We should have a motion that authorizes the correct amount of what we're going to pay him.
Yeah, because I just double-checked the agenda from last month. That the dollar amount got carried over from the expenditures in last month's meeting to this month's on the agenda.
So I would do a motion to amend a motion to authorize approval of the invoices, the correct amount of the invoices for Jim Markman's law firm.
Okay. You want me to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
You want me to do that?
Let's go ahead and straighten that out.
Yeah, I would move that we correct our approval of paying expenditures to reflect the correct amount of these 2 invoices for Richards, Watson, and Gershon, as mentioned in the finance report, as opposed to what was mentioned on the agenda document.
Second, good catch.
Yeah, good catch. Okay, I just call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passes. Thank you, Bob. Good catch. So Donna, are you going to carry into a discussion?
The budget?
Yeah.
I'll refer to the staff report that's in the packet. Staff's been asked to look at the budget for the next fiscal year, which is also the calendar year beginning January 1st. Just summarizing the staff report, our sources of revenue limited, as I'm sure all the board members are aware, and it's summarized on the staff report. Prior to the joint powers agreement being put in place, each of the 5 voting members of the Groundwater Authority contributed $15,000 for a total of $75,000. Kern County has provided a loan in the amount of $500,000 to the Groundwater Authority. Indian Wells Valley Water District provided what we're calling a $500,000 advance, which is to be a credit when the permanent fee is established. There'll be a $500,000 credit awarded to or provided to the Water District. City of Ridgecrest has asked for $210,466 in expenses that were incurred for legal services and facility use, and that's to be reimbursed. And of course, the other sources of revenue for the Groundwater Authority to date have been the pumping fee, which was established at $30 an acre foot. And as I cite in there, we've projected the first year for that fee to result in $648,579 in revenue. And actually, the fees collected during that time have fallen short by just about $68,000. So that's part of what's contributed to the cash flow issue. We have received a few grants. Prop 1 administrative grant for $249,950, which I believe we are still owed the retention on that, the 10% retention. There's a $1.5 million Prop 1 GSP preparation grant. Also included was $646,000 for the Severe Disadvantaged Community Grant. And we have one grant pending, the Water Smart grant through the Bureau of Reclamation for $396,200. Again, that one's pending. So in your packet, we have provided some scenarios, I'll call them. One, the pro forma that we presented last month, we had some revised information, revised data that we added. So the first one in your packet would be the revised pro forma with the $30 per acre foot pumping fee. And you can see, if you look at the bottom line, projected out through 2020, a negative balance continues each month. And at the end of the year, there's a deficit of $515,718. So with the help of Ty, our chief financial officers here, we looked at a few different scenarios with this model, put some different variables in it. I believe the next one in your packet is basically just an increase in the pumping fee to $65, just a number that was put in there. And you can see with that, and it assumes that the Severely Disadvantaged Community Grant continues. You can see that's shown and reflected. We got the schedule, a proposed reimbursement schedule from Stetson. So whether or not that's accurate, we don't know based on our experience so far with DWR. But if we were to increase the pumping fee to $65 per acre foot, you see by October we do show a positive balance carrying out through the end of the year with a ending balance of $74,615. The next one involves an increase in the pumping fee again, $40 from $30, and it does include the assumption that we do get the Water Smart grant. And if we do get that grant and we do increase the fee by $10, you see that by July we do start showing a positive balance that carries out throughout the year, with an ending balance of $49,178. And lastly, keeping the pumping fee at $30 per acre foot, assuming that the Water Smart grant is awarded, again, $396,200, and a proposal that each of the voting members, again, make a contribution of $25,000 for a total of $125,000. Again, you see a positive balance by July of just under $95,000, ending the year with about $5,500 positive. I will point out all of these scenarios do not include the items I mentioned earlier, the $500,000 loan repayment to the county, the $500,000 credit on a permanent fee that's established, and also the $210,000 roughly back to the city, their reimbursement for their services they provided prior to the JPA being formed. So those are just some scenarios that were modeled. Obviously, there are changes that can be made, but it looks like, you know, our sources of revenue are very limited. It's either grants, contributions from the member agencies, pumping fee. Pretty much grants. Sometimes, of course, they include matching funds. The one that Jeff just talked about looks like we can probably get that without having to put any cash out, but some of the grants do require matching funds, and we may have to put cash out for them. I did want to talk about the severely disadvantaged community grant. Again, all those scenarios do show reflecting payments from that grant totaling $646,000. But I need to point out that the way this is being structured, we would have to front some money for those, and I'm not sure where that money would come from. With respect to the severely disadvantaged community grants, just to give you an update, and I need to dig out Heather's note to me. Give me a second here. Heather did advise, we had a letter that we had submitted to DWR requesting an extension on that grant. I need to find her note, but basically they responded that there were some changes that were revisions required to the scope and the schedule. And rather than submit a separate letter, DWR requested that we resubmit the letter with those changes to the schedule and the scope, and also requesting the deadline. Heather indicated in the email that she felt that DWR would extend the deadline if need be. But again, the issue for the Groundwater Authority to consider is, with cash flow, can we front that money? Waiting for, our experience with DWR reimbursements has been a couple of months to get that money back. So looking at our cash flow, our sources of revenue, that certainly is a factor. I think we have in the past expressed a desire to do those projects since there's benefit in it, but we do have to look at it through the lens of cash flow. Did you want to chime in? No, I'm sorry, I was reading. Okay.
Are you ready for a couple questions? Because I have.
Yeah, I guess the point is that the concern with the cash flow is that there'll be instances where we've just received a grant reimbursement, and the board will be approving the first invoice from the consultants that are doing the SDAC programs, and we still have to wait another 60, 75 days before we even submit the reimbursement for that first invoice. And then it's taken another 2 or 3 months to actually get the money back from DWR based on past reimbursement requests. So some of those we could be, as much as 90 days, and maybe more beyond the 90-day approval that they're already, the 90-day delay that they've already authorized. So it could create some big cash flow issues.
I think to try to keep the discussion in some kind of an order here, I think the first thing that maybe we should talk about is income. What are the options for income? Obviously, the things presented by the staff, I have been told by legal, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we can't make a change to that particular ordinance just to increase the amount of pumping fee. Is that a correct statement, Jim?
The pump fee that's in place right now, there is authority to go ahead and increase it, but only to pay for the cost to develop the GSP.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about here, because I think I've said it before that we sort of have 3 hurdles in front of us. One is to pay for the GSP. In other words, get this pro forma down to the at least 0, if not a positive amount, where everything's paid for. And then from there, the next step would be to start developing budgets and potential ordinances for the administration of the GA, and then down the line, maybe and possibly projects. So I think unless the board objects, I think we ought to concentrate maybe on getting this paid for through in discussing where the income's going to come from to pay for this. So based on that, quickly, I have a quick question. Does the first pro forma, which basically says we operate as usual, the very first one,
Right.
does that include all the grant money, including anything that is being held back that would come to us after completion?
I believe the only thing it doesn't include would be the Water Smart grant. Is that correct, Ty?
I guess I'm asking about the retention amount. Does it include the entire amount of the grant?
Retention for the administrative?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in there.
For the retention for the
For
Prop
the-
1 grant,
yeah.
the first part,
Yeah.
that is projected or accounted for in the estimated 2019, that 24,449.
I'm trying to find that on, I'm looking at the
Second
first.
column.
Second column. Oh, I see it. 24,449. That's all the retention?
For 249,000, yeah. Now, what it doesn't include is any kind of the delay in schedule on reimbursement. There's going to be some reimbursement that comes out in 2021 for expenditures that take place in 2020.
So the full 1.5 million is accounted for in the income from the grant?
No, not for the 1.5. There's some of that's going to be carrying over into the reimbursement will take place in 2021.
Oh, I see, in 2021, okay, but it's all accounted for. The question was the retention amount, because there's a good deal that's that they keep until we complete the grant requirements, and then that's released. And so that's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking. So, and Don, you said, I mean, our income sources are limited. It's strictly the pumping fees and the grants. And so I think, you know, how can we increase that income to get this paid for?
Yeah, well, the other side of the budget, obviously, you've got revenue and then you have expenses. So if we can talk about expenses, as you're aware, we have three major contracts, if you will, that are consuming our revenue. Obviously, Stetson, and with regard to Stetson, there have been several tasks that have been assigned to them outside the scope of their original proposal. Working with Steve, we'll try to quantify what that is, but it has had an impact on our expenses. Requests to attend meetings, to participate in attorney meetings and such, those were outside the scope. So we've accumulated a lot of expenses that weren't originally budgeted. We have RWG Law, which of course is Markman, and then we accounted, I believe, in the pumping fee for about $200,000 in legal costs. And so as I report in the staff report, invoices to date are about $102,000. So I don't know that there's opportunities for cutting there, but we can certainly try and monitor those costs a little bit more in terms of travel here. It's expensive for him to come here. Maybe participate by phone, but we need to look at those a little closer. The last one is the Capital Core Group, the water marketers that we hired. And the proposal that they submitted was for $229,475, and we still have about $112,188.50. There has been discussion among staff about putting the brakes on them. We've confirmed this with Steve and Stetson that the work they've done to date is probably more than needs to be done. It definitely is more than needs to be done for putting together the GSP. So in that respect, we can put the brakes on them there. But we've had a little concern internally about totally putting a stop on them with regard to the funding. They did submit a draft strategic funding report, which I forwarded to the board and to the staff. Originally, they were going to be here, but again, because of cost and because of consideration of where we are, we said, you don't need to be here. Let's just give the board and the staff the report, give them months to digest it, and then come back and discuss it perhaps next month. But with regard to looking for future water sources, the reality is, we don't have the money right now, even if they found something. So we think we can put the brakes on that part of that component of their tasks, but we feel strongly their funding, the work they're doing in securing funding for projects for securing infrastructure costs needs to continue to some extent. there's some criticality in this time of the year with legislative appropriations and authorizations. I did send an email to Capital Corps to advise them what the staff was recommending, that we slow them down or put them temporarily on hold. They did respond with a memo, and one request was with regard to the Defense Community Infrastructure Program in particular. That's there's some time criticality involved there with the schedule, and they did ask within their memo to be able to perhaps continue to respond to the Secretary of the Navy's request for information. So what I'd like to propose, and I'm going to ask Mr. Janis to expand because he's more eloquent on this than I am. He deals with these people more than I do, but I would suggest that the board authorize Capital Corps to submit a revised list of specific tasks related to these federal funds that we are seeking, and submit it to staff for approval. Specific tasks with costs, so that we can keep the costs under control, but yet continue with the momentum that they've established within their context for securing funding. And at this point, I think, like I said, Mr. Janis can be more eloquent on this than I can. So.
I have a quick question, though, about the Water Smart grant. How is that affected if we do put the brakes on Capital Corps?
It doesn't really. I don't think there's any effect. Right now that we've submitted the application, I don't know for sure when we'll hear on it. I would expect probably the next couple of weeks. But I don't see how that's going to affect us. There's no intent to stop Capital Corps permanently. In fact, what's been suggested is within the next week or so, and I've let Capital Corps know, they have a conference call with the legal counsel, with the attorney group, to look at what their tasks are remaining and maybe reprioritize those tasks and get a better sense of what actually needs to be done, so we can maybe control their expenses a little bit more.
And I'm on board with that. I just want to make sure that we meet our if that grant is awarded, and it's always a big if, that we meet our obligations to that grant in terms of matching funds and work that's taking place.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in mind as well, because I know part of it was the work that Capital Corps was doing. So we want to make sure that if however much brakes we put on Capital Corps, that if this Water Smart grant comes through, that we don't jeopardize it by not doing our obligation. And that's one thing I'm sure.
Before asking Mr. Janis to speak, just to point out, the remainder of our expenses are relatively small things. We're currently paying for this facility, for the PAC, TAC, and board meetings. It varies from $500 to, I think we've had as high as $1,200. I think, as been previously expressed, there's benefit to having these meetings, being able to stream live and also have them video recorded, which we weren't able to do at the Water District. So there's benefit to that. We have insurance. We have audits. We're going to be coming to the board for approval for another audit. We need to have the 2018, 2019 years audited. The last one was for 16, 17. But I mean, all these costs are, a couple $1,000s here, a couple $100. We've done mailers, for example. So my point is, there's not a lot of opportunities to reduce expenses other than to monitor the activities of Stetson a little closer, RWG Law, and for Capital Corps. But again, at this point with Capital Corps, I do think there's a criticality in keeping them moving, keeping them engaged, if you will, with the funding sources. And at this point, unless...
I think Bob maybe has a quick question or comment.
Just regarding Capital Corps, you're talking about kind of slowing them down right now, but I'm wondering on these three different budget performas you've done, where it indicates just about $65,000 spent with Capital Corps, is that based on the slowdown approach, or is that...
That's not reflected in, this is coming from, this is a new staff recommendation. It's not reflected in the... Okay,
so if that potentially could reduce this amount in 2020, depending on how we manage...
Well, I believe they're accounted for in all these scenarios. The money that for their contract is fully accounted for in all three scenarios, correct?
Right, it's fully accounted for. It depends on how quickly...
So if we slow them down and reduce their task, I think the point you're making, that could have a positive effect on those numbers, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is
Yes.
whether the slowdown is reflected here. It's not.
Not.
This is if we paid them the rest of the contract.
Correct.
And as I see it, the expenses you didn't, the only thing you did in these scenarios was look at potential income changes, correct? The expenses is something we're talking about right now. So you've left the expenses pretty much the same as we see them
currently
now.
authorized.
Right,
Correct.
right. So
With closer scrutinization of expenses
Right.
and there's potential for reducing that a little. I don't know how much, but we as a staff can commit to looking at these kinds of expenditures a little closer, being more objective in terms of, do we actually need to have people here present? Some of these people, can they call in? Do they even need to be participating in the meeting, and those kinds of things? But again, opportunities for reducing expenses, as you can see, fall on those three.
But I don't see it making up $500,000.
No, I don't either. What I'm thinking is that how long will it take staff to drill down to a number? They say, here's the amount we can save. Is it 100,000? Is it 150? Is it 200,000? Or is it $250,000? I don't know what the number is.
It's kind of a moving target, because as we go along,
we just
Stetson gets assigned things to do, and we don't know what's going to.
And that's important as well. Steve, I think I asked you this once before. Do you have an idea of the amount of money that's been spent on things that are sort of outside, that weren't considered at the time to plan? Things like attending meetings and lawyer meetings and everything else. Do you have a number roughly?
I don't right now, Mr. Chairman. I don't right now. We are working on it. I've got a spreadsheet and I've got a summary for doing a couple things. One was to summarize those costs, and also to make a separate list that I was going to work with Don on, a separate list of the items that are not covered by GSP, by Prop 1 grant, that have been done outside, to get an idea of how much has been spent and what items are outside of the Prop 1 grant work that we're doing for the GSP that are sort of discretionary stuff, and get numbers, and I'm going to get that to Don.
And that could potentially help this other grant, because there's things there maybe that can be paid for by this other grant.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay. And would it be safe to say that number's in the $100,000 range?
At least, because
Okay.
I can tell, you want to, on the order, we spend quite a bit of money supporting the allocation program. I mean, these meetings, the attorneys' meetings, were going on, a couple times a month, and all-day meetings with follow-up meetings and calls, and some work was done to support that group on looking at different ways to allocate and things like. So there was a lot of work done on the allocation alone. Was probably more than that.
Because where I'm leaning with this myself is that I would hope that we could have direction to the staff to come back and say, squeeze tight. Where can you cut back?
Yep.
And what's that in terms of dollars? We do realize it's a moving target.
Yep.
It's always going to be a plus or minus. And including capital core and anything else we're doing, squeeze tight, and how much can we get out of that expense column for now? Yeah. And that's why I think it's important we have this quick discussion on capital core as well, because that's part of that, the expense reduction for the short term. So I think you want to say Dave had a comment he wanted to make. Is that about capital core and the grant for the DCI? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much about the grant as it is their tasking and efforts to date, which have been well received and well done. As mentioned, I received news last night that we were considering, because of the budget issues, putting them on a hold, implying a hard and fast hold from efforts. And as part of full disclosure, in my real life, I'm the executive director of the China Lake Alliance. And one of the things we do is advocacy for China Lake. We are not part of China Lake. We don't speak for the Navy. I have to say that. But we do advocacy for the base in the community where the majority of the workforce resides, here in the Indian Wells Valley. So we actually coordinated messages on the advocacy front with Capital Corps quite a bit. Met frequently with them separately, coordinating messages, went to Sacramento, have participated in Washington at some levels with their messages. And the schedule difficulty or timing issue that Don referred to is, most of you are aware, we don't yet have a federal budget for next year. We don't even, in some cases, have appropriations passed for certain parts of the budget, defense being one of them. 2 of the 7 federal entities or programs that we are eligible to get grants from that would support our downstream efforts that underpin the GSP are involved with DOD. Others aren't. Capital Corps is working with all of them, but where I run in and work with them a lot is in the defense side of the house. And mentioned in their letter was the Defense Community Infrastructure Program and Secretary of the Navy requests from them. That is one of the key ones that would help potentially support infrastructure development off the base for water resiliency, specifically in this case, water delivery mechanisms, pipelines, et cetera, for imported water. And while we are in the budget negotiations on the Hill between House and Senate committees, authorization committees, and appropriations committees, and getting the vote on the floor of the Senate where the appropriations bills have not been finalized, and then into conference committees between now and the end of November is a critical time where our folks have been in front of them, and they have to stay in front of them at some minimal level in order not to drop off the radar screen, because all of our competitors and other folks that might be eligible and pushing the opposite direction on these programs overtake you if you disappear from the scene. So for the next, what I would support the request that Don and mentioned, and we brought it up in the staff meeting this morning, to ask Capital Corps for what is a minimum task list to keep alive your contacts in supporting some of these programs, Defense Community Infrastructure Program in particular, appropriations, so they stay alive in front of folks. Get a price on that, look at that, because otherwise some of the effort to date could be wasted and we could lose it for the future. So I think it's a short time frame. It would be a reduced task. It's what's the minimum level they need to sustain it. As a further piece of information, one of the things they have done, we have quarterly conference calls with the governor's office and all of the other groups in California that support the 30 defense bases that are in California today. And on the conference call we had last week, one of the discussions came up supporting these programs, and Capital Corps actually participated in that, urged participation in gaining support at the state level from all our other state legislators at the federal level, the entire California congressional delegation that all the members of the California Defense Group have access to. We have access to Congressman McCarthy, Senator Feinstein, Senator Harris, and some others, but that brings to bear all these other folks. And those are the kinds of efforts that they have done and garnered support statewide for common things, and this is one of them that we need to keep in front of Washington at the federal level. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I surely admire the work that you do on that front. It's very valuable to us, and so I very much respect your opinion on it. Thank you. Yes, Bob.
Yeah. I wanted to just make sure I was on the same page still with the SDAC programs. There's no local match, right?
No match.
Okay.
No.
So the issue really is only cash flow.
Cash flow.
Yes. Okay. Is there a lawyer in the room for the authority?
There are a lot of lawyers in the room.
I know. There's a second clause to this. Who is familiar with eligibility requirements for community development block grant funds? I'm seeing no.
Phil's standing up.
Hi, Phil Hall, County of Kern. I do the legal work for him, but we don't do too much of that part of it at the legal side. So
yeah. So I mean, my basic question that I was having in my head in terms of the cash flow issue with the SDAC programs, because I don't want those to stop, is could any of the member agencies on this body or who manage a CDBG program and may have allocated funds to projects but still have a fund balance because it hasn't all been spent. I'm just curious whether this kind of work that we're doing under the SDAC 2 programs, whether or not it would qualify or be eligible for CDBG funds, and whether some of the available balance that the member agencies have of CDBG could be used temporarily to be paid back so that the projects that have been allocated the funding still get done. But in the short term, we're using CDBG funds to serve these disadvantaged communities, which is the intent of that funding, to get this project done.
My initial reaction is yes, it could be, but we definitely need to make sure that my initial reaction is not 100% wrong.
Okay. Well,
but I think it's a good. I think it does fit, but I'm not going to give you 100% yes.
No, and I appreciate that, and I can talk to people at the county in terms of, one, whether they think it's eligible, and two, whether they have any money that's cash not being used currently that could be help solve this problem. But it was just a thought I had as we were talking about SDAC. I know in the past, when I did have more direct relationship with the CDBG program at the county, when I worked for a supervisor, the county always, even though we had allocated it out to projects, we always had the problem of not exceeding the 150% annual allocation sitting in the bank. So as you're waiting to reimburse people for stuff, you still got the cash in the bank, and you can't exceed 150% of your annual allocation. So I have a feeling there's still probably some issues with managing cash flow in CDBG not exceeding that. But
so, Mr. Chairman, so we're going to dig down on that, and that's a really good question.
Yes, I'll be on the call with Lorelei because she runs most of the program for the county tomorrow morning, if not on the way home.
That's fine. Perfect. That's a real good question. Let's look at it. Okay. So you're going to do San Bernardino County?
I'll do it on my side, see if it's eligible, see how much money we may have, whether we could allocate it to a program in Trona, which is...
I would love to divert some of those funds, if possible, to help us out with this.
Okay.
And kind of brings us to discussion as a part of expense is the SDAC. And, and that's all a cash flow issue. And that's where we're at now. This is a cash flow issue. I mean, obviously, we've miscalculated on the income from the pumping fee based on the amount of pumping. And I don't know how the expenses were worked out, how close they were. I'm sure at the time we did them, there may be some things missed. And like Don said, there's a lot of unanticipated things that begin to happen, that there's no way we could have gotten it into the calculation for the pump fee. But SDAC concerns me because you're looking at the contractor footing the bill and then billing us, obviously, for all the work that takes place, including whether the devices he's installing, whatever it may be. And then I believe they're net 30, and then after 60 days we're paying a penalty percentage. And I mean, all that mounts up.
We got extended.
Yeah, that's right, you got it extended. But still, even with the way we see that when grants are applied for, and I would guess that the state would probably want quarterly invoicing on this as well, which puts us farther in the hole on cash flow. So there's no real good answer to that. So, Bob, I think your suggestion of looking for that, those block grants, is a good idea, because I was on the verge of saying, well, is SDAC something we can continue with at this time based on cash flow issues unless we solve this problem?
Yeah, and I'd like to try to solve the problem because, as the staff report points out, the optics of sending money back and not doing a program and then asking for other grant money is not going to put us in a good position.
And I believe even with the next grant we'll be applying for, the fact that we have the SDAC grant plays into that as well, with the amount of money available. That gives us a leg up. So I have to agree with you there. So that boils down to, solving this through the staff working really hard to see how much, because I can't see looking at increasing income through additional pumping fees unless we do a really good job of squeezing really hard on the expenses. One way or the other, we got to squeeze hard on the expenses. And because in my mind, just for myself, I can't see looking at increased pumping fees or something until we drill down on those expenses. I'm looking for more comments from the board or questions. Bob, you're usually pretty good with these numbers and things too. You're a data man. What do you say?
Well, I guess the last kind of question I have is, before we go to public comment on this issue, is staff has given us some different options to discuss without a specific recommendation of which one to choose. They've given us, spreadsheet, kind of overview spreadsheets for each scenario. So in order to comply with our JPA agreement that says we have to adopt the budget before November 1st, would we need to give you direction as to which one of these spreadsheets we're adopting?
we'd like direction. We can possibly refine these a little bit more based on, as Chairman Kaczynski said, looking at expenses a little bit more, making some projections on those, so we could maybe refine the numbers. But it seems to me we're not looking at increasing the pumping fee, so two of those scenarios are out. And I think the one we would focus on would be the $30 pumping fee in the Water Smart grant, and looking at the expenses a little closer. And
what I'd like to do is hear some more hear comments from the public and this before we go into drilling down to staff assignments, if that's what you want to call it, and staff direction. Because I agree that I don't think it's any one of these scenarios, and I still would like the answer about can an ordinance be adjusted to increase a fee if necessary? And I haven't heard the direct answer to that one yet. So any other questions from the board?
Keep in mind two things we need resolution on are, of course, the SDAC, which we're discussing,
right,
and also the recommendation on the Capital Corps that
right,
we get a continuation on specific tasks that they need to continue their work on the funding with federal funding.
And I kept notes of those, but you as well. So once we hear all the comments, we'll come back and get those decisions. Okay, John, you have something?
So I would agree, Chairman, with your general sentiment that we need to first look at reducing expenses to the extent we can. But then I heard Don say that we're not looking at increasing fees, and I'm wondering if that truly is the case with the current temperature of the board, at least in terms of are we looking at that? Because it's pretty clear that just reducing expenses isn't going to get us over the hurdle here.
It's either that or it's a cash flow issue that drags this, in my opinion, and Ty, correct me if I'm wrong, just drags it out longer. I mean, the money will be coming in from the pump fee we have. It just drags everything out. So I think that's a discussion we need to have. Is it something we need to look at solidly, increasing fees?
I mean, and just to be clear, by dragging it out longer, we're also looking at a reduced pool of folks who are actually pumping in the long term.
Correct.
So
all that needs to be taken into account.
Okay.
Yes, understood. Any other comments from the board if I open to the public? All right, I'm open for public comment.
Josh Nugent on behalf of Mojave Pistachios, and I appreciate all the work Don and the Water District's obviously done on this, so I appreciate a look into the finances. A couple questions I had were, are the costs and revenues segregated as far as the grant's concerned and as far as the fees are concerned for what was collected? Because the pump fees can only be used for specific purposes, the grant fees can only be used for specific purposes, and then I'm assuming there's going to be like cash stuff. So I assume there should be some stuff in the background to keep track of all that in case we get audited from whoever. Are we still going to have a general manager position since we don't have any money? It's just kind of a general question. A general reminder that taxes and fees usually work best if you don't economically destroy the tax base. Have we compared costs to other GSP and GSA developments, both in Kern County, San Bernardino County, Inyo County, and throughout the state, just to see where we are relative to others? Looking ahead, I'm just seeing that there might be significant legal exposure by all the closed sessions and things that you guys are having. So has there been a large pool of money set aside for representing the community? And then also, at what point is a Prop 218 required whenever we start getting out of these pre-GSP fees and into, because I don't think they can go that long, into the kind of actual post-GSP timeframe. So anyways, I don't really expect answers to all those, but just a couple questions that I've been ruminating on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Judy Decker. I would like to back what David Janis said. I think it's critically important for this community to keep its finger in the federal pie, hopefully not get it cut off, but it's critical since the vast majority of the people that live here work for the federal government. We need their support. And you need to keep Capitol Corps in some manner working on that. Thank you.
Stan Rotora, speaking for myself. I'd like to reiterate one comment that was made by your general manager a little bit earlier, is that all of the numbers in the bottom line in the lower right-hand corner ignore the fact that we have liabilities in the amount of about $1.2 million that are not reflected in these sheets. And basically what that really does is indicate that we have a negative fund balance, and that can be problematic. I think allowing it to get any worse would give us visibility in areas that we don't really want visibility. We are a state agency, and we really need to have a fund balance that's not continually in a negative state. Second thing is I noticed on the expenses that the line for Stetson, and not picking on Stetson, but it goes down to $35,000 a month. And I kind of understood that originally when I first saw this budget, because I thought we were going to have a GSP and we were going to go on and generate some projects. But at this point in time, my understanding is a lot of the things we thought we were going to get done to finalize a GSP were not getting done. So obviously things that we were going to do in 2018 and 2019 are going to flow into 2020. And I guess I just don't understand how reducing the budget for Stetson or anybody else doing this similar type work can keep going down the way that it's currently planned in the budget, when we know we haven't actually achieved the amount of work that we were originally planning to already have done. That work's going to have to get done, and I'm assuming it'll get done in 2020, but I don't see any funding for it right now. Thank you.
My name's Sarah Zegers, and I'm in the county of Kern, here near Ridgecrest. And in all of the financial discussions, there's sort of an elephant in the room. I'm wondering if any of the water acquisition representatives have looked at something that is very important, I think, and that's getting back the natural flow of our waters from up north, which a lot of goes into the LA aqueduct right now. And if LA would go on desalinization and the aqueducts could either be destroyed, dealt with to get water to us, that water used to fill Owens Lake, and the steamer ships that took ore from the mines went across Owens Lake. Look at Owens Lake nowadays. That water came all the way from up north down, and the DWP, the LA DWP, and LA now take water from up north and comes from our mountain streams that come down in these canyons. It goes into their aquifer and goes right on down to LA. And if you have you looked at how many acre feet a year go through that aqueduct? And I think that should all be part of the financial thing to look at. And my question was, has the idea of getting LA to abandon those aqueducts and go on desal over a period of time been looked at? It can be done. Workups have been done. So anyway, I thank you for your time.
I'll take a moment to address that after the last public comment. I'm going to try to address that, at least what I know about it. Okay? Thank you. Renee, did you have something?
I just have a question. If you choose to increase the pumping assessment fee, does it go into effect immediately? And when are we gonna get enough results? Because we're going into the winter now and all the pumping goes way down, and like last year, it was really low at first. So I'd like to know about that. Thank you.
Ty, I think the pumping assessment fees have been adjusted based on our knowledge of what was paid since last year. So the answer to that is yes, they've adjusted the pumping fees.
Good morning, gentlemen. Mike Neal. Just looking at what we got here in front of us, we're talking about around $1.5 million costs per year to at least certain residents of this valley. And a lot of talk about scratching up another 100,000 here, 20,000 here, 50,000 there, so we can pay this. Remind you that who's paying it are at least you that live here in the basin, myself and every other resident of the basin. And I believe a previous comment was made by Mr. Nugent about you don't want to go down the road of taxing people into economic oblivion, essentially. This could all lead to exactly to that. You're just talking about funding the GSP. When we get around to the GA itself, rough estimates is it could cost the residents of this valley, primarily the water district customers, $8 million a year. And yet, the only talk is, how do we tax the people more to pay for it? That's essentially it. Now, I've asked this question, and some of you have heard this, and I hope you have thought about it, and the rest of you should think about it. Whose idea was this whole thing from the start? Did you guys come up with this idea all on your own, decide to form this JPA, and then go into all this action and tax all these people all this money and come up with this plan? No, you didn't. It was a state's idea. And according to California law, unfunded mandates are supposed to be paid for by the state. So what I see missing here is an income source directly from the state to pay for this in its entirety. And then you wouldn't have to worry about anything. You could just go forward if you wanted to continue with this. The whole question of whether we should be doing this is a whole nother question, but obviously you're going to pursue this, and I sit here and I look and I see basically you're all sitting here acting as functionaries of the state of California, dancing to their tune. They tell you what you had to do, and you got real busy getting to it. And I get to pay for it, and everybody else that lives in this valley gets to pay for it. And we're going to get to pay for it dearly, very dearly. I'm telling you, it could be $1,000 per year per resident household, easily. That'll drive a lot of people into bankruptcy in this valley if that occurs. And it could well occur. It could well be just exactly that. So I posed this to the PAC. At the PAC meeting, I said, does anybody here have what it takes to send the bill to the state and tell them that they need to pay for it, and we'll implement a GA when we get the money to pay for it from the state?
Sir, I appreciate your comments there, and I think what we're missing here is the fact that the state has allowed us to have some local control and some local control of costs as well, because if we weren't sitting here doing this, the state would come in from Sacramento and they'd impose their own plan with their own fees, and the fees that they projected from the get-go were astronomical. I'm not saying that the fees here aren't substantial and hard to deal with already, but the fees that the state would come in and impose to manage this basin, I don't think you'd appreciate, well, I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate any more than you appreciate what's going on right now. So,
well, what I would appreciate is if you're going to do what you're doing, go ahead and do it and send the bill to the state. They don't have to dictate every little thing. They just need to pay for it. It's that simple.
Thank you. Is there any other comment before I address the aqueduct issue? And the reason I want to address it is I'm hearing more and more about it. And I am not a geologist, but I know a lot of geologists, and I've studied a lot of things that have happened here in the valley. Yes, you're right about Owens Lake filling up, but even if it did, it's been 10,000 years or more since the water flowed there this way. So you're talking about a huge change in hydrology and geology that occurred, that would have to occur again for that to happen. There were studies done in 1913. Some people are familiar with them. The Lee study is one I'm most familiar with, that did an aquifer recharge study back then, and if I believe it was between 8,000 and 11,000 acre feet a year. That was before LA was taking water through the aqueduct. So our recharge was calculated with Owens Lake filled at that particular time, and it was calculated 8 to 11,000 acre feet. So, the idea that cutting off the aqueduct is going to cause water to flow here is, I do not believe it's correct. I haven't seen any geological proof that it's correct. And, but will it help the northern counties? Obviously. But will it increase our recharge? I don't see it. I haven't had a geologist come forward to say that would happen, unless there's one here who wants to say that. So I just want to make that clear. I mean, it's great to think, let's just cut off the aqueduct, but we're talking about conditions that existed prior to them taking water, which still our recharge was between the 8 and 11,000 acre feet. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
And not to get into a conversation that's going to be just circuitous, but I don't think I pronounced that correctly. Circular. If the LA DWP aqueduct could be shut down, I assure you that there are tons of communities in Inyo County that would have already done so. We've been working on this issue for hundreds of years, so over 100 years. So it's not something that hasn't been thought of before. But if there are new ideas out there, it's probably not the forum here to really make that happen.
Mr. Chair, we're talking about finances right now.
Right,
we seem to be going away and talking about the viability of destroying the LADWP.
Yeah, I appreciate. I just wanted to make a comment on that one issue. I don't want to get into a discussion about it. Thank you.
May I make a short comment on your comment?
Please do.
All right. Whatever you said, remember way back in 1903 or whenever they started, you could hand dig wells here by hand and pump them out with windmills. So what you said and what some of the other impressions have been is incorrect. There is proof.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the comments, and I appreciate all the frustration. Whether or not we can address LA Aqueduct and how that all works is certainly expressing a frustration that we all feel, and that's the importance. I think the practicality of doing that is, not within our domain or our capability, but it certainly is a frustration that we all share. A couple of things I want to talk about. Capital Corps, my opinion on Capital Corps. I think they've exceeded all expectations for me. I think they've done a phenomenal job, and I'd like to compliment them on the contributions they've already made to the development of general ideas and concepts in terms of how we're going to manage the future and develop our GSP. They've made significant contributions, and I'm sincerely appreciative of them. I also am weighing the costs of doing business and the balancing of our accounts, so I find it critical that we ask everybody to slim down to absolutely essential. I agree with Mr. Janis that their lobbying efforts are significant, and those you can't eat unless you're sitting at the table. If you're not at the table, you're not going to eat dinner. So we've got to keep some effort moving forward to keep visibility, because people who make these decisions frequently do not care about this little tiny community in the middle of the desert, 3,000 miles away from where the decisions are made. Our influence and our ability to influence those decision makers is perishable, and we need to stay on top of it. So I would support reworking their contract to a minimum of influence, but I think it's essential that we keep some capability moving for them to work to influence the people that need to be influenced. Comment about the general manager. Someone made, I forget who, I think it was Josh maybe, I don't know. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. I think we got a great general manager. I'm very thankful that Don is doing what he's doing. I don't think we can operate without one. The county is standing by to fill that position in if we decide that we need to do that. We'd be glad to do that. Right now, I think we have an agreement. I think we're going to have a conversation a little bit about what our general plan is for a general manager in the future, but it's an expense that we're not bearing because it's in-kind support and plan on keeping it that way. Comps, you talked about other basins. We look at that constantly, and my staff in Kern County looks at that constantly, and we are looking at best practices throughout the state of California and how people are managing. It's difficult, as you know, to compare apples and oranges, but there are aspects of each GSP that are similar in nature, and we're trying to glean the best out of what everybody's doing and try to bring something that's pertinent to us and our ability to best practice our GSP by leveraging the experiences of other water districts and other GSAs. I can't read my writing. Litigation costs you talked about. Yeah, there's going to be a whole different, I believe those are real, and I believe we have to prepare for that. And we are developing a outline of a GSP that's going to include capabilities for us to generate revenues to offset those costs and to offset the future administrative costs, the mitigation costs, and the remediation costs and the litigation costs that we're going to be looking at down the road. Was there another issue? There was a two-part to this thing. There was Capital Corps. What was the other piece?
You think it may be SDAC?
Yeah. Okay, I'll stay off on that one.
Okay.
That's my comments for right now. I'm looking forward to supporting this recommendation.
Any other comments from the board? I concur with you, Director Gleason, about Capital Corps. I think we need to keep our foot in that door. We've a mistake to take it out at this time. And again, I think you all know that I'm a firm supporter in the fact that we need to continue with the administration of this group through in-kind, the general manager, whatever it is. It's just something that I don't feel good about putting on the board as an additional cost to this authority until we control our costs. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So, as far as the paid general manager, I just don't see it down the road. In fact, a lot of the staff, it just needs to continue like this. Bear with us, and we've got to get out of this hole. We've got to work our way out of this and become sustainable in terms of income to manage the administration. And yes, as I said before, our first goal is to get this GSP paid for, with the following goal being now the administration of it, which will include any admin cost, including any potential legal costs, which we know are going to happen. And I do know that staff is working on bringing a number forward for that, for the post, what I call the post-GSP plan, or post-GSP budget. So I am in support of the staff to, first of all, continue to work to squeeze down the expenses as much as possible. I think you need to look at everything from attendance and who's required to be at the tax and the PACs, unless absolutely necessary. How much can be done by phone, has to be personal. How much legal fees do we need to continue to dole out? Where can we, every place you can look at cutting back, we need to look at cutting back. And bring that forward as a number saying, here's where we think we can shrink our expenses. I understand there's no guarantee. That there's always things that come up, and there always will be things that come up that we need to handle and take care of. But I'm looking for your best effort. And then come back, and as far as the income side goes, if again, your best recommendation for, I think we need to have that, where's the direction going to be? Do we want to look at an ordinance adjustment, even if it would be a minor amount? I hate to see an ordinance adjustment if we think we can ride this out, but we're talking about riding it out if we continue to at the particular pumping fee and the income we expect. Even if we're very positive that we're going to get the Water Smart grant and the other grants that come through, we're still looking at having this whole thing zeroed out into, Ty, would I be wrong to say mid-2020? Somewhere near there, maybe a little bit longer even, without adjusting some kind of income. So that's my input. I don't know if the board would have any recommendations to staff for income adjustment.
Thanks, Dr. Gleason, for getting us back on track. I agree with pretty much everything that's just been stated. I think I'm a little more bullish on the fee structure issue. I'm concerned about the practical reality of writing it out and who that cost ultimately gets distributed to, and the cost is for really being incurred by current users in the basin. So I would recommend that we take a really close look immediately on adjusting that fee structure.
Anything else from the board?
Is there a recommended motion?
Do we need a motion or just a
Or we're just having a conversation?
Not with respect to Capital Corps, which is about the only thing I've heard.
Right. Okay. So Don, I guess we'll ask you, have you heard from the board would you need to hear to proceed forward for looking at reduction expenses and potential increase in income? Can we take, is there anything we can take off the board of the 3 recommendations that came, or the 4 recommendations that came across? Or do we still want those on there? And that includes any contributions from the members of this committee or just of this authority? Because that was one of your
That was one of the
staff,
scenarios, one of the models, yes.
Yeah, that was one of the models. And if that is coming off the board, you need to know it, unless you're just going to bring it back again. And so does the board have anything to say about that? I see.
Take it off.
Take it off. That's okay. That's your vote. That's your opinion on it. I hear Inyo agreeing.
So what I'm hearing is to continue to reflect this severe disadvantaged community grants.
Yeah.
Did I hear to take a look at the pumping fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a valid request.
Okay.
And if the answer comes back that, no, we can't do it,
okay,
or it expires at this time and we need to reinstitute, I need to know more information about what could be done with that.
Okay, so that's the second thing. We'll look at the pumping fee, and then also I'm hearing support for Capital Core Group to submit a revised task list of the minimum tasks that they require to continue with their efforts in getting funding opportunities through the federal.
That's what I understood. And please, I know I'm answering Don, and so if the board wants to step in, if I'm saying something I shouldn't, please step right on me and say no. So, and that's what I understood.
Okay, so those are the 3 things I've
at this time,
noted.
yes.
And then we'll also look at expenses, see if we can make some adjustments to expenses, and then bring this back to the board next month.
And you know, I want to bring forward as well the fact that are we at the point we still need to consider continuing City Hall for the TAC and the PAC? Because that could save us some money. I want you to look at that and make a recommendation. I know we did it because of the audio that was, the video that was available, but we are at the point, or we want to continue for a certain amount of time. Maybe you could say it's some particular month.
Well, if you want to have a discussion now, we're looking at probably $12,000.
Yeah.
Maybe through the GSP.
Yeah.
And then after, for sure.
Yeah, you need to go ahead and look at that as a recommendation, because I can foresee, as I understood it, the video, that we felt more comfortable that when people see the video, they understand more what's being said and who said it, and you get a better picture of everything. And I agree with that. But maybe at some point we can move over to back to the water district, which is in-kind contribution, which saves money. It may not sound like a lot, but as we know, every little bit helps right now. Okay, so consider those things as well. And we'll take staff recommendations. Yes, Bob.
Ron, did you include in that list looking at the SDAC and how we might address that cash flow issue?
Don had mentioned that we wanted to continue with the SDAC and to look
We will
closely
continue
at
to
it.
reflect it, I think, in the budget, pending whatever you can find out about possibly fronting some money to support it.
And the big pluses for that are your fact you don't want to be giving money back you got. Secondly, it may affect the additional grant that we're looking for, and Steve keeps shaking his head yes on that, and we can't do that.
And we've incurred some expenses.
And we've incurred some expenses
so far
already.
That we believe will be covered by the grant once we get the invoice. In fact, we have actually submitted some minor cost already for reimbursement, so we're kind of in a sticky spot there.
So when can we predict an official kickoff point? We're still waiting for the state to say it's got to be by this time.
We actually, as Don pointed out, I think at the start of this conversation, we're waiting on the final letter to DWR that would effectively extend the agreement and make some modifications on the prior schedule. We held that until this meeting, so that will go. In fact, I've already sent it to Heather to go forward because I got the pulse of the board to go forward with that letter, and Jim's going to take one last look at it before it goes. That's going to go. We'll get the agreement back, the amendment, and we'll move forward.
One refresher I need. Do you remember from the contracts how long it said it would take them to complete the contract for both the water efficient use and the leak?
Jeff?
Was there did
I know we've got plenty of time.
3 months? Well, what I'm asking for, it seems to me the longer we can delay saying start, the better off we're going to be.
I agree.
As long as we finish it by the time that we need it. Okay.
The board, the DWR did extend it longer than we asked, so we have some room on the end. That's why we haven't been pushing.
So what were the length of the contracts? Do you remember, Jeff? I just can't. It's 3 or 4 months each or something. I don't know.
It was longer than that. To effectively do the program, we were estimated they needed 9 months to a year.
Okay.
And I forgot the exact date DWR is willing to extend the contract. I know it's at least through the end of next year. I forgot if they suggested going beyond that or not now.
Boy, if they do, I mean, the longer we can push that, the better we are, because in my opinion, the later we do the kickoff point, the better our cash flow will improve.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We recognize that.
So with regards to the SDAC, again, it sounds like once we go forward with the letter, we're committed. And what I'm hearing from county lawyers that he's not 100% sure about the funding. So if that does fall through, then it falls on us to continue with the grants and deal with the cash flow issue.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Exactly.
just understanding
I mean, yeah,
that's the...
I agree with what Bob has said, and as I understood, is that the SDAC is something we want to continue as it is. But I still think there'll be some final agreement made. I mean, once we know what the state says, if they all of a sudden say, okay, we'll give you till mid-2022, then that changes everything too. I'm not sure what they're going to say, but until we have that letter, I think that we need to hold back in making the final go, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll go forward with the letter then.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else before we move on? We may have beat this one to death.
I don't think we beat it to death. We're going to still be talking
Yeah,
about it next
you're
month.
right. We're gonna, it may beat us to death, by the time we're done. Okay, so we're up to the water resource manager report.
Yes.
All
And
right.
We actually covered quite a bit of things already, some of the stuff that's here. And I don't know if we have PowerPoints up there yet or not. We changed some text and emails with Gary. If we don't, the handouts are out there. Real quick on Prop 1 status schedule, Don did give you an update on invoice number 2. It covers the period October 2018 through March 2019. So we're still in arrears with the state. Don mentioned that we've been talking to our representative, to Jennifer at the state, and indicated that the check's been written. So we're waiting for that check. That will complete the process for invoice number 2, which is also the progress report. Remember, there's a progress report that has to be written for each one, too. So that keeps us, that'll get us updated. We expect that in the next couple of days. Invoice number 3, which would be April 2019 through June 2019. Again, we're already in October, so we're still catching up with the state. We had actually anticipated that invoice and progress report would be ready and would have gone out probably a week or 10 days ago. Heather came to me and looked me right in the eye and said, I can't do it. I'm getting the GSP done. I got to write GSP. And I said, okay. We're the ones not getting paid, so write the GSP. But it's now scheduled to go out next week. She's wrapping up the GSP. That's why part of why she's not here today. She's wrapping up the GSP. It has to be done this week. So that invoice will go out next week, and it's for approximately $160,000 of reimbursement. So that's the update on Prop 1.
Just a quick comment. I for one, and I would hope the community appreciates what you're doing, because in the fact the way these invoices are coming and what we're allowed to do with the bill, I don't know how we would have accomplished it. So
Well,
I
appreciate that.
I personally want to thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. We are. I've said it before. We are in. I mean, we're here and we're in. We're not going anywhere unless you tell us to stop. We're in, and we're going to keep working, and we'll figure the whole thing out. So anyway, thank you. We're going forward. That's A. B is SDAC. Do we really have anything, Jeff?
I think we've covered everything.
I don't think we have anything in SDAC. I think we beat it to death. We got our direction. I've already given it to Heather, so she's going on it. And then the last one is the sustainability plan schedule update. And I guess we don't have it up above, but
I think we do.
It's in the packet. I think the key dates. Are you going to go through the key dates?
I was going to do the.
Oh, he just got
look
that
at
one
that.
up.
All right.
Do we have the next one? Right
There
there.
we go.
We do have. Thank you.
The key dates. Steve said that the draft GSP had to be done this week. We are going to get the draft GSP to staff to review, and Monday. So we've got this weekend too. He said this week, but
it goes out Monday.
We will be working this weekend and get it to staff. After that, staff will give us their comments by October 28th. We're going to incorporate the staff comments and turn around and get it out to the TAC and the PAC on November the 4th.
That's a Monday, I believe, with the TAC PAC meeting
Yep.
being on a Thursday.
On a Thursday.
Yeah, and we did get a request, just so you know, Jeff, because David Janis is sitting right in front of me, that if there's any way to get it out before that Monday, like the Friday, so they have more time to look at it, we're going to try to do that. But
If staff has no comments, we'll do that.
yeah, that's it. We shouldn't. We've been talking to staff, so it should be pretty good.
No, we will do whatever we can. We know that we're given a relatively short time for the PAC and TAC to review it. Once we get the PAC and TAC comments, the target is to get it out for public review, have the full draft GSP, and get that out for full public review on December the 2nd. And then the public hearing by the board to consider the GSP is scheduled for January the 16th.
So there will be a public review period.
Yep.
In that segment.
Now, I know that Director Gleason, I believe you asked about a public workshop type thing for this.
Yes.
Do we have that?
We do not have that in the
in the plan?
We don't have that in the schedule right now.
Right.
We talked about it internally, and frankly, we had an argument. I said it should be earlier. These guys said it should be later, so we didn't know where to put it. But we do know that Director Gleason asked for that. And an evening, but before or after which part? Is after the PAC, before the PAC, attack meetings? Where would be a good place? We were kind of trying to figure out to schedule that.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff, did you have thoughts on when to schedule that?
Well, at this point, we're getting it to the PAC and the TAC, just a few days before the PAC and the TAC meeting. So our intent would be to give an overview about what's in it at the PAC and the TAC meeting, because they're not going to have had time to review it. We won't be able to get into a detailed discussion of their comments. Certainly we take any preliminary comments, but we'll give them an overview to help them review it. My thought is for the public, when we get it out to full public review, we do something similar. Is soon after it's available to the public that we schedule an evening meeting to present it, give them an idea of what's in it, so that they'll have some understanding as they go to review it. So early in the public review period is when I was thinking we might have something like a public workshop.
And Jeff, that would be after the TAC and the PAC.
Yes, after the PAC and the TAC have reviewed it, given us their comments, and we've reviewed their comments, then we'll have a full public review draft that'll be available for 45 days.
I think that's a good idea. The PAC and the TAC are designed as representative groups. Each member has constituents in their representative group. So they get the information, they sit back, take it, they digest it, they go back into their groups, and they come better prepared to a public meeting to have that a conversation about their inputs.
So based on the schedule, it looks like sometime in the first two weeks of December.
That's what I would think.
Is where it fits.
I hear you. Yeah, it's going to be tough for the holidays, but that's what we got to do. And it's after the TAC and the PAC.
Yeah, after the November TAC and the PAC. And we do have a TAC and PAC meeting scheduled for December. We could combine them and make it a public workshop at night or something like that, because we do have one currently scheduled. Whether we need it or not, I don't know, but I agree, we do need the workshop. Right. So we'll figure that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, we save some costs.
Anything else in your report, Steve?
Just one more quick thing, just to make sure the board is aware, we had somewhat planned to, obviously we attend the TAC meeting with Jeff's presentation on the schedule. We've been requested to also legal counsel, probably Jim Markin, and I think he's been confirmed to be available, requested to attend the PAC meeting once this thing is out also. And I know we've got budget issues, and so we discussed earlier. I just want to make sure the board's aware that there is a request in that there be technical support and legal support at the PAC and TAC when the presentation is made, overview of what's in the GSP.
Yeah, please do, because I'm going to.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I noticed it was in bold type in the PAC report. So I think
bold type.
Steve stole my thunder. I was going to cover that.
You owe me.
What are we hoping to achieve by this expense?
Well, let's review the cards on the table before this point. We've had PAC meetings at night, and we've had very limited to no coverage because of the coverage by Stetson Engineering and legal staff. I think we've had one or two covered by legal and Stetson. in the last year. And so we've been put in a situation where I have to convey with limited knowledge information, not a full-time member of the staff, not a part of closed and open sessions, only based on the data that I get from the water resource manager and his staff's conduct of the TAC meeting that morning in presenting the same documentation from a policy perspective and being able to answer questions that evening for the TAC to take its representatives, as you mentioned, of every water user and water pumper and make cogent, relevant comments back to the board and back to the water manager for inclusion. Here we said we have not yet seen the final 3 chapters in their entirety of the GSP, nor have we seen the whole context. On Monday, the 4th of November, we are expected to receive the first time full context with all the details filled in, and so we have the individual chapters to review, lots of questions that will come up, that have already come up, and put that in the whole context. And if we do not have the ability to have a member of engineering staff to explain those portions relevant to that, and legal staff to explain those items and those things that have legal ramifications that may be on the engineering side as also, we do not have the ability to put together cogent, relevant comments on the whole thing within the 10 days we have after that, because it's due back from us on the 15th. And leading into what my report was going to be, my request was if we must have them for that in order for us to have complete understanding. To the point that some of the members said, we'll pay their damn hotel bills.
Deal.
Deal. You should be ashamed of yourself.
I think we could do it with one person staying. I mean, we normally have more than one come to the TAC. We could have one. Jeff volunteers. He always volunteers.
You can, but if we have the council, that's 2. But yeah. I think it's penny wise, pound foolish not to do that. And if we would still have to have a second meeting. I think if we have that coverage at this meeting, we wouldn't have to have a subsequent second meeting because we would have enough information to go back in that short timeline and get cogent answers from membership, PAC membership, and for WRM to put it back in before the complete plan comments from both the TAC and the PAC. So that's answering your question, Supervisor Gleason. Thank
you. I suppose we anticipate Stetson and legal counsel at the workshop as well. Yeah. Correct? Okay, just want to be sure. Are there any other comments or questions for the board? Steve, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Jeff,
thank you.
Anything? You're open to public? All right.
Just real quick, Joshua Nugent from Mojave Pistachios. I'm one of the people who volunteered to pay for a motel room. So I did want to say that if it's okay with you guys, on our next monthly pumping, we're going to include an additional $5,000 just as a contribution, and hopefully that'll be earmarked towards having support for that November meeting. But we think it'd be great to have Stetson there, so we're just going to tack on additional $5,000 whenever we do our next reporting. So we appreciate the opportunity to have a review and think it'd be nice to have people there to ask questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Stan Rotora, speaking on my own behalf again. At the last TAC meeting, I had requested, I think it was the last TAC meeting, that when the document is released to the PAC and the TAC, that it also be released to the public. The reason for that is clearly the 45-day review period goes over the Christmas holidays. That's a terrible time for any type of review period. I believe I was told at the TAC meeting that it would be released to the public. I think that's the right thing to do. There's no reason not to. It ought to be in a reasonable condition at that point in time. So just want to remind you all that the public really should be receiving it at the same time. Just put it on the internet. Be that simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
Nick Panzer, PAC member. I think it's just been touched upon, but I'm not crystal clear. On November 4, we PAC members are to receive the first complete draft of the GSP. And I just want to be sure that on behalf of my many constituents that are as interested as I am in seeing that, is when we get it on the 4th, it would be posted simultaneously to the GA website. So every interested party and anyone not on the interested party list would have the same access to it via your website that I have to it as a PAC member. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any other public comment before I move on? Steve, that's none, last chance, okay.
Thank you.
Number 11, update on outreach efforts. I guess I can ask the one thing, how are we doing with the billboard?
Not really, but I will. That hasn't gone as smooth as we would have hoped. We did receive a proposal for the billboard to be located on Indian Kern Road, which we signed and sent back. And at that time, we received an acknowledgement that it would be up by September 30th. Well, that didn't happen. Lauren has been persistent in trying to reach out to him and find out what the status of it, what's going on. I believe it was last week we finally got a response that said, you didn't sign a contract. Well, we never were provided a contract. So we got the contract last week. I signed it, and we have a commitment to have it up by October 28th. I don't know how much good it'll do, but it should be up by then.
Thank goodness we changed the wording.
Yeah, we did change the wording, yes. That's all I have for public outreach, unless you've met with any, I don't know if you've met with any groups?
No groups. Plans, but not yet. All right, 12. Board questions regarding Policy Advisory Committee and Attack of the Pack. You have some more you'd like to comment on there, Dave?
Well, I had 4 comments
Okay.
to highlight. Obviously, the 3-page report stands for itself, and we've had feedback that y'all, in fact, read that, and if you haven't had a chance yet, I would encourage you to. 2 of the items have already been addressed, but I will address 2 of the others. One is the sustainable yield allocation chart, which was the subject of one of the public comments when the meeting first opened this morning at 10 a.m. Generated obviously a lot of comment and questions, a lot of questions, and one of the questions that dominated was the fact that it has not yet been approved by the GA. However, the originator of the document was not identified, and so there was a lot of speculation about that. You can see the specific comments that were made both by members of the GA and by members of the public regarding that. The second comment in particular, and I mentioned it to the Water Resource Manager as well, was concern over the fact that in this chart, which tries to take into account all the users in the valley and the pumpers, it did not account for the brewery, and the brewery does in fact have a spring, which is surface water, but it also has a well. And there was some discussion about, does it export water, is that in its products, and is that officially called an export, et cetera. And in any case, would it not fit into the definition of interconnected surface water issues as one of the 6 undesirable result categories under SGMA? And since we didn't have any expertise there to answer the questions in depth, which had apparently arisen at the TAC over 2 years ago, the statement was made, and we stated, the committee agreed that the Water Resource Manager and the board needed to address this and have it as part of the public record. That not necessarily here, but at some point.
I'll address one of the. I watch these things. I watch everything, and I was sort of surprised that that chart, that layout was not presented as to who developed it. That came from legal counsel, and I believe even in the write-up with it might have said that somewhere. I'm not sure because I didn't have that in front of me, but that's the answer.
And that's what the writing said. But
yeah.
Who is the originator was the question that by name that some folks asked.
It was legal counsel. And as far as your second question, Steve, you have some comments about the brew?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. They're good questions. First of all, I'll give you the right answer for the whole thing, and that is the brewery is considered a de minimis users, so they will be included. When we do the verification and the allocate, whatever's done, whatever the board does, they'll be in. On the backing it up, we looked at the brewery, not in detail, because we didn't go out and look at anybody in detail, just some of the records trying to gather information months ago, because when I first heard that there was a concern about a brewery, I said, oh my gosh, if they're using that much water, they need to be in. We need to know what's going on. What we found with the information that we got was they really aren't using very much water. It doesn't take that much water to make beer and make soda pop and stuff, a few acre feet. So it still counts, but they're not using that. It's not a huge user. Secondly, there was a question raised, I think at the PAC, about exportation. The use of this water to make their product and wherever they sell it is not an export, as a classic export from the basin. For example, Cyril's pulls water out of the basin and takes it out of the basin, and they use the water for their product out of the basin. It's not an export any more than the export of nuts or the export of fruits or anything else, or the export of, if you have a water bottle and you drive out. It's not an export. So an export's not an issue. The spring, at some point, we'll need to know how the spring works. We understand they use the spring to do their brewery, to do their bottling that they do. Water rights law for springs is that if it emanates on the property and never leaves the property, they're not even under the jurisdiction of the state for a surface diversion because they have full control of it. It's their own water. I don't know that that's the case, but it doesn't really matter. Either way, they should be an overlying user and they should be non-de minimis. The well's different. If they're pumping the well, they'll be a non-de minimis pumper, and we should include those guys. So I think that covered the interconnection. No, we certainly haven't looked at it yet. It's a good question because that is part of SGMA. Realistically, just stepping back and looking at it, the reason why we don't see it as a big red flag, most likely that spring is being fed by sources that are above, not below. And the concern with SGMA is that if you're pumping groundwater, you're going to affect surface water supplies that are on the surface. And so it could possibly affect it but typically the springs are fed from the upper areas. When you have a spring that actually comes out of the ground as an artesian spring, typically it's been coming from an upper area, so it's probably two different sources. But it should be looked at, yes.
So is there any other questions the board members have on the report?
I don't have any at this time. I was going to ask, just to follow up with Eddie, do you have anything to comment on the TAC? Any questions or concerns?
Yeah, I'm just kind of pitch hitting for Adam here, so I'll try not to ruffle too many feathers. I guess, first of all, are there questions that the board has of sort of the TAC?
No, I watched you. You did a good job.
Well, yeah, I guess I always get surprised
a
little bit, or maybe disappointed, because it seems like there's not always a lot of questions, which is okay. So I was thinking maybe I'll suggest to Adam at the next GA meeting, maybe we'll have a sort of a pop quiz for the GA, closed book.
Maybe you should.
On the content that was delivered in the TAC summary.
Yeah.
So yeah, just keeping your mind.
And you know me, usually I have all kinds of questions and comments, but it was such a good report. I just don't have any at this time.
I also have concerns maybe sometimes the microphones are maybe broken. But so I'm just going to touch on a couple of items. One kind of echoes what David mentioned. Some of the content that was delivered at the last TAC meeting was delivered in short order, and you mentioned legal counsel. I don't know if it's a threat. You can't slap legal counsel's hands, but you can't issue that kind of content in that short time frame with those kind of statements. And a lot of times there's not a lot of detail, specifically in the Chapter 4 section that was presented. So, we were disappointed in that. Second item was, there's about to be some heavy lift items that are coming, with the GSP content. Not so much chapters 1 and 2, a little bit about chapter 3, but 4 and 5 and even 6. And so that 10-day window, kind of being able to turn substantial comments around, making sure that those are incorporated, into the final GSP. It's going to be a heavy lift. So it's unfortunate that that's the way it's happened, but the TAC members are up for the challenge, and the PAC members, it sounds like. Third item was, just kind of checking in on sort of how the de minimis well registration's been going. It seems like it's been kind of lackadaisical, but okay, it is what it is. And then to end on a positive note, because that's what I'm all about, right? Been optimistic. And great to hear about the Prop 68 grant. That's great. There was a lot of enthusiasm about that. I would encourage Steve maybe to kind of reach out and work with some of the TAC and PAC members to make sure everybody's voice is kind of included in that, because it's going to be extremely competitive. And I was also, again, to end on a positive note, glad to see that Stetson's fee has come down from $27,000 to $20,000, because that's about what the going rate is now for those kind of things. Okay, great. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board for the Tacker Pack before I move to public comment? Okay, public comment, please.
Good afternoon, Elaine Mead. I'd like to address Steve for just a moment concerning the brewery. I think a de minimis user is a residential use.
Right.
It is not a commercial use,
Right.
so it really wouldn't matter how much water the brewery was using.
Right.
The other thing that you should check into is the export, not in their bottled products, but the truckloads that they're hauling out. I would think that would be an export.
Okay.
Thank you.
Judy Decker, PAC member. I'll second what Elaine said about the truckloads of water right from the brewery. I would also caution you that with the short time frame that you are giving PAC and TAC members to review the GSP, especially, as Eddie said, the chapters that we have not yet seen that are going to be the meat, hopefully, of the document, I would presume we could continue to make comments as PAC and TAC members at the public hearing you will have on January 16th, as well as any comments we will be able to get into you that make sense in that short 10-day period. Thank you.
Sarah Zegers again from Ridgecrest. As I recall at that TAC meeting, somebody brought up another entity that wasn't on that chart, and that was the wild horse pens, the BLM wild horse pens. Are they not somehow included in all this?
The GSA has no authority to regulate either the government or the Bureau of Reclamation as their federal entity. So they're sitting here volunteering their time and effort to try to assist with the preparation of the GSP, and we thank them for that.
Thank you.
Bureau of Land Management, I apologize.
Yeah. Thank you.
Don Decker. The water for the horse facility actually is coming from the Navy. That's physically where it's coming from. The thing I wanted to bring up, and I would have brought it up earlier in your budget discussion, but didn't. I think you've been concentrating on your cash flow issues, but I think you really have an overall budget shortfall. I can't see any way that, stretching out, looking at the payment for the GSP out into out years with pumping fee is an acceptable accounting procedure. I think you have an overall budget shortfall, and I don't think you have any choice but to adjust your expenditures and increase your income. Thank you.
No more public comment? All right. So I guess we're on to General Manager's report. Don, you're on again.
Okay, with regards to the first item, Capital Core, you've got the report in your packet, and we've already talked about that. Again, just emphasize most of the work that has been done in the last month was devoted to the draft strategic funding plan, which you received copies of. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else to report.
One of the comments in that report was about how they originally thought we would hear about the Water Smart grant in September, and now they're thinking in October, but it could be delayed. Has there been anything more on that since they wrote the report?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
No, it's hard to pin DWR down.
No, I get it. I just was wondering if they heard anything since they drafted that.
No. Well registration, I can report as of this morning, since there may have been some that came in since we came to the meeting here, but since the ordinance was passed, we have had 60 de minimis and 2 non-de minimis well registrations.
Thank you. Comment about Capitol Corps, make sure you pass on to them. And for me, I think they've done a stellar job. I think the amount that we learn from them and the understanding of how the water world works in their respect and what they brought forward to us is, so in no way, trimming this back is a reflection on their performance.
I'll convey that from the board, but I know Steve and I both have personally given them that.
Convey that for me as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Over the phone and by email. And I will contact them this afternoon and let them know the direction that staff has received.
Thank you. All right. Any comments or questions about the general manager report? Anything from the public? I think I'll warm out. All right. We're on to closing comments. I guess I'll start down there at the end. Tom, do you have anything?
I don't, but if you need any information about horse and burros, I can certainly provide it to the board.
Thank you. Commander?
None for me.
Okay. Scott? None? Nothing from you? At this end? Any comment, Bob?
Sorry, I can't resist making one. There was a couple of comments earlier during the meeting about billing the state for an unfunded mandate, and I would assume the public's not unaware of this, but even if we sent a bill, that does not guarantee payment. There are a number of unfunded mandates the county has sent bills to the state for and has not been paid for years. So just sending the bill does not mean we get paid.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it.
I want to comment on the work that the TAC and the PAC does. Every time I watch you guys, I'm amazed at the people that are up there and the jobs that they're doing. And we're talking about a good deal being there as volunteers for the community. And you don't know how much I personally appreciate that, and to see the work that you're doing, especially now. And I just want to thank everyone again. And so with that, if there's no other comments or questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Thank you.